when I was about 16 years old, I lost my biological family, or it was the start of losing my biological family from 16 to 23. I raised myself since 16 and put myself through college and figured out work and climbing corporate ladders and getting off the ladders and all of those other things in between. But truly finding a family and this chosen family of mine that I have is the thing that I hold with the most joy and the most pride, because for many years I didn't know if I was going to have that again. So often what had happened to me in the past is when I would share who they were, they would say like, oh, they're your friends. And I say, no, they're my chosen family, because it's more than that. We've been in this ride together now for almost 20 years together, sort of choosing each other. They've been at some of the lowest lows that I've had. I've been at some of their lowest lows. And so it's an intentional choice to feel like we are always a part of each other's lives. And it's a different, special relationship that I have with my niece's parents and then with my niece. And so that's why I say that, because it used to feel, quite honestly, Dr. B, that people would diminish by saying, oh, they're just your friends. And I would feel almost the sting of that separation of, here I am, the outlier that doesn't have biological family, but I get to write my narrative. And they're my chosen family, and no one else gets to define that relationship for me. And so that's why I sort of claim that phrase.
All right, welcome to just another fantastic edition with Living Boldly with Purpose. My name is Dr. B. I am just, I don't know what you say, because have you ever heard that expression, over the moon? Yeah. That's pretty exciting. Monica, I don't know if I'm over the moon to talk to you, but I'm pretty close. So I can't wait to have this conversation. That we get to talk to each other. And here's the reason why. We got to talk a little bit before the show. I guess, in show business, they call it the green room. It's just us talking to each other online. But what I found out is, like, when I usually ask somebody about what they're excited in life about. And one of the answers that I would say 70% of the time is people are excited about what they do. And then you a few questions into it, you say, what are the most important things in your life? Well, my family is, and the things I do extracurricular. Well, then how come you're not excited about what's most important in your life? Why are you excited? I mean, and I'm not saying you shouldn't be excited about your work. I'm not saying you shouldn't be excited about what you do. But if we say as we talk, and then maybe for some people, it's just this, I know that's the response I'm supposed to have. Family's first, God's number one, family second. And then what I do is third in my life. Well, if you're telling me that, and then all you talk about is the third or fourth or fifth or sixth thing, then somehow your words aren't reflecting what you tell me is important to you. So for those of you who are watching, I asked Monica, I said, so what are you excited about? And she told me family. She told me about her niece. She told me about the things she gets to do. And right then I said, yes, we get somebody who has, I don't know if it's priorities right, but if I were to ask her what her priorities were, I'm sure she'll tell me it's her family. And then she's actually congruent. I don't know if I remember probably Tony Robbins 20 years ago, and I never forgot it. He said, the most powerful force in the universe is being congruent with the identity that you hold for yourself. And so I've kind of taken that to heart and trying to always make sure that my identity matches what I talk about. My identity and my purpose and what I do matches what I talk about. And so I'm so excited to have you on today, because I want to know more about what you're excited about. I want to know about who you are. I definitely want to know what you do and, why you're doing this and, how you, work your way, your magic through this thing called life that we have. But at the same time, thank you for sharing that with me. And so I'm going to give Monica, like I do all of our guests, the opportunity to share with us who she is and her story. This is my favorite part. Sometimes I'd say all the time is my favorite part, because I want to know who somebody is before I know what they do and why they do the things that they do. But if you can kind of get into their heart a little bit, it just makes it so fun. So Monica, the floor is yours. Tell us about you, all about you, the whole world of Monica Rivera, and then we will go from there.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. I don't think I've ever guested on a podcast and almost started crying before I even got to talk on the mic, which is pretty fantastic, but I can kind of feel the tears in my eyes a bit. But thank you for what you said, because identity truly is so important. And the stories we tell ourselves, and are they congruent with the stories that we tell other people? So I like to say I'm someone who has lots of commas after my name, as I think we all do. And so some of the commas after my name is, if we start with my niece, I'm her favorite titi, which is just another word for aunt. So I love to say that and kind of rib her other aunt. I'm also a daughter. I'm a friend. I'm a personal brand and communication strategist. I'm a speaker. I'm a former podcaster. I'm a curious woman. I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm a lover of travel. And so those are just some of the commas that encompass who I am. And when I think about really my story, and specifically, contain multitudes of stories. So there's never just one story about us. But as I think specifically about what I'd like to share today, the reason my niece is so important to me, and I bring her up all the time, is because she's actually my chosen niece. So it's my chosen family. So when I was about 16 years old, I lost my biological family, or it was the start of losing my biological family, from 16 to 23. So I've lived a lot of years on this earth pretty much on my own. And so I raised myself since 16 and put myself through college and figured out work and climbing corporate ladders and getting off the ladders and all of those other things in between. But truly finding a family, and this chosen family of mine that I have, is the thing that I hold with the most joy and the most pride, because for many years I didn't know if I was going to have that again. And so I always lead with that, because they are, if you were to see my desk in front of me, I have all these little trinkets that my niece has made for me, or written notes to me, and all of these things here. And part of the work that I do is with her in mind. And I love to tell her, I brought you up on a podcast today. I talked to people on stage and mentioned your name. And she just gets so excited about that, because she's truly always with me.
Oh my gosh. That is so cool that is. Now, when you say the word chosen family, what does that mean? Does it mean that you went out and just say, I'm interviewing families and you're going to be my family?
I wish it were that simple, to be honest. But so often what had happened to me in the past is, when I would share who they were, they would say like, oh, they're your friends. And I say, no, they're my chosen family, because it's more than that. We've been in this ride together now for almost 20 years together, sort of choosing each other. They've been at some of the lowest lows that I've had. I've been at some of their lowest lows. And so it's an intentional choice to feel like we are always a part of each other's lives. And it's a different, special relationship that I have with my niece's parents, and then with my niece. And so that's why I say that, because it used to feel, quite honestly, Dr. B, that people would diminish by saying, oh, they're just your friends. And I would feel almost the sting of that separation of, here I am, the outlier that doesn't have biological family, but I get to write my narrative. And they're my chosen family, and no one else gets to define that relationship for me. And so that's why I sort of claim that phrase.
And thank you for sharing that, because that is so cool. And I think of, in the culture that, I'm part of, I'm half African-American and half Native American, and then my wife is Latina. And so, we start thinking about these cultures, and in those three cultures, family is everybody. Family is not, like, if you were my friend and we spent 3 or 4 or 5 years together in college or whatever it is, my kids are calling you uncle and auntie. It's just like I say, we have 16 grandkids. 3 of them are part of a family that we've been with since the kids were 6 weeks old. Of course, they're my grandkids, right? Do they have to be biological? We adopted 2 children that were from New York, and they're because now they are have my last name. Obviously they're family, but they were family before the adoption process went through. They were family before when they were foster kids. It's just it's so amazing that some folks try to separate that out. Like, some of the closest relationships that we get to have that we would consider family you might not have the same DNA as we do, but have the same, I don't know what the word would be for it, the connection, I guess, that we have. Oh, and that's so neat. I would love to hear it, as much as you want to talk about it, because I think that listeners, always want to kind of know how somebody makes it through to be as successful like you are when something tragic happens, when like a biological fight. Now you said you had to raise yourself at 16. Maybe just share a little bit like your identity then as you were trying to figure this out compared to now you have this great family and it's, that kind of springboard you to where you're at.
No, of course. So I really liken it to these three words: grit, determination, and relentlessness. And all three of those, I think they take different shapes as I've gotten older, but grit, determination, and relentlessness are the three things that kept me moving forward. And so at 16, if you think about it, your brain hasn't fully formed yet. And anyone who's listening that's gone through, they call it big T or little t trauma. It's all trauma. But anybody who's gone through this knows what it feels like to have to navigate some circumstances where not everyone else can really relate to it. So I'm here, 16 years old, figuring out what it's like to be a teenager. And while I have friends that are getting ready for prom and thinking about what school they're going to go to, I'm dealing with some really big issues of what is life going to look like for me? And I was living on my own at the time, and there was all of these things sort of happening around me. But one thing I knew, and that my parents had instilled in me, was education was important. I was always told as a kid about how smart I was and how to use my brain and to continue to read and be educated. And so that was the path that I really held on to. Something else, which is also very familiar to anyone who is a first generation to this country. So I was born here, but my parents had the mentality of you work hard, you don't rock the boat, you get the stable job. And growing up, I always wanted to be creative and do these different things. But it's funny how the voice of your parents still echoes in your mind, even when they're not here. So that underpinning that they had shared with me and that foundation of get the stable job, don't rock the boat, get your education really served me well because I knew those were the things that I needed to work on. So regardless of how I was feeling emotionally, continue to stay the course. Finish high school, got into all of the schools that I wanted for college, made an economically sound choice for college because I was going to pay for it on my own. And then internships, jobs, all of those things, kind of really climbing up the ladder and doing all of the steps the right way. Yeah. I just continued to have that in mind. And I was so focused on make sure I have that stability for myself because I knew there wasn't a safety net. There wasn't a couch to sleep on. I needed to figure it out on my own. So I was very pragmatic. I used the resourcefulness that I had, my grit, and I just worked really hard in order to build the life and the safety for myself that I knew I wasn't going to have otherwise.
Wow. This is, I mean, just hearing you say this is so neat. When I think of like the word grit and the word determination and the word relentless, there are 30-year-olds who can't figure out how to live on their own and do it well. You're doing this when you're 16 years old. You're figuring this out. I mean, are you having to figure out like how to pay bills and like all that kind of stuff at the same time? And then you use this word grit. Give me an example of what grit means to you and how during this time you had to just use it.
Absolutely. So interestingly, we all have a money story of our first memories of money. Well, I grew up in a family that fortunately we did have conversations about money and we didn't have a lot of it, but the money that we did have, I remember every other week when my mom was paid, we would sit down around the kitchen table and she'd have a stack of bills on one side and then the cash check on the other side. So it was the actual dollar bills, not this day where everything is on a card and you don't actually see it, but it was the two piles of bills. And so I was able to see from a very young age, this is the money that we have coming in. These are the bills. And once we allocate the money to the bills, this is how much we have left. And sometimes the pile was very thin, but I knew that everything had a cost associated with it. So again, it was almost as if they were preparing me. And I like to think it was a bigger force. I like to think that it was really God's hand preparing me in these small ways for when I was older so that I could do these things on my own. I already had an awareness of what it meant to pay bills. How did you do it? How did you label we played everything in money orders. What was the money order labeled to? So I knew the mechanics of those things. Mm-hmm. And so that served me. I would go to high school, and then after school, I would go work at a retail job, and I would come home and take care of the house and pay the bills. And I did that for a while. And then my dad actually moved in the very last year of school because he knew, well, you can't legally be 16 living on your own. And I've given you this space enough to kind of go through grieving. But now there's a practical element to it, which if people were to find out you are living on your own, then you might go into a system. So I'm going to come move in. And that was also really hard because I'd been with my mom for such a long time, and now my dad was moving into the space, and there were all these changes happening at the same time. So when I talk about grit, it's a scrappiness. It is I'm going to do it imperfectly. I'm going to be willing to make mistakes, knowing that if I just stay persistent and consistent, I will eventually hit the bedrock of success. Even if it's messy, even if there's dirt underneath my fingernails to get there, I'm willing to do it. And so a lot of the beginning stages of my life and into early adulthood, there was a lot of grit.
Oh my gosh. So I mean, you figure this out, you're excited, you got it going, and then all of a sudden dad moves in, and I'm sure dad's trying to be dad too, right? He's trying to tell you what to do, how to do it, and not just I'm going to move in to help you, but I'm going to move in to be your dad, right? And you're like, well, wait a minute. I'm kind of like, I got this.
Absolutely. It was tough. Yeah, it was definitely tough. And there was a lot of friction that had happened for us. But there was also things that we always bonded on. So, for example, I love sports. I got that from my dad. So whenever I felt like it was a little contentious, I was like, why don't we put the game on? Or he would say, why don't we watch the game? And that was sort of our neutral zone where we could come together and watch any sport, literally any sport that you could put on, and we would bond in those moments. So anytime I felt like it was a little too heightened, and me being a teenager and him coming in sort of felt like it was clashing, we knew how to cool it down by watching the game.
That's cool. So you end up going to college. Do you pick a college where you get to live in the same place, or did you move to go to college and live in dorms and stuff?
So I lived in a dorm. So I went away for college. And part of that was because I think I needed to leave the environment. It was very heavy and emotionally charged, as you can imagine. So I went upstate to college, upstate New York. And it was a complete culture shock because, again, I'm a city kid. Everything is open 24 hours. Anything you could want is right there at your fingertips. I remember one day going out and wanting to just go to a diner. And I walked over, and the diner was closed, and I looked at my watch, and it was 10 o'clock, and I couldn't understand why the diner was closed. And it was like, oh, because upstate New York is very different than New York City, where things don't stay open for 24 hours. So there was a little bit of that shock, but it actually ended up being exactly what I needed. I needed some quiet. And it's funny to say that in college, but compared to New York City, where it's always buzzing, this did feel a lot quieter to me. And I also needed to just go through the grieving process and figure out some things on my own, and who I was going to be, what that was going to look like, what I wanted to study, where I wanted to work eventually. And so college wasn't that fun partying experience that many people have. It was more of a coming of age and figuring out what was life going to look like.
Wow. Well, I can imagine when I think about you saying the quietness, and some of it's just the people you're around, right? Because if you're in different areas, you're around people that may be louder or a little bit. But when I think of that, I think of you and having to figure out every day from 16 until you went to college how to live. And then you go to college, you're not figuring out how to live anymore. At least for a semester or 2 semesters, I get to just come to the dorm. I get it, got a meal plan or whatever it is.
Exactly.
I'm not worried about what needs to happen for me to make life work. And I can imagine that had to be pretty comforting and pretty quiet.
It did. It was really helpful. Yeah. And I had some great friends that were there as well. And I figured it out. Yeah, figured it out.
I was going to ask is the friends that you developed and the people because now it's new relationships, right? You've now went from the relationships of people who, are just part of the city life, the city community, all kind of walks of life. Now you're in a group of people that are focused on, goal. And I'm sure there was the kids who were the party kids that weren't part of the world you lived in. But the part of the world it seems like you lived in were people that were, caring about their futures, caring about where they were going, just a different group of people. Did your identity start shifting a little bit then of like the possibilities of who you could be or who you were going to be compared to just figuring it out?
Absolutely. One of the things that I think has always been, it might be the only child, but I had a roommate and she was very much a wild child, loved to party, no judgment. She took
Yeah.
advantage of what college was to her, but she always accepted. She would say, "Hey, do you want to go out?" And I'd say no. I was never someone who was into peer pressure. I would say no, and she never pushed. She let me be exactly who I was and never tried to force her lifestyle or anything she was doing onto me and I her. And so it was just a great relationship where we respected each other and it worked. In the suite that I lived in, because in the dorms there was 3 bedrooms, it was a suite, but in the other bedroom was a girl who lived in Brooklyn, and so she was raised in Brooklyn, I was raised in the Bronx, and we just became fast friends because we had similar backgrounds and we understood what it was like to be upstate versus living downstate in the city. And to this day we are still thick as thieves because we just had this connection between us. And she also had a very nurturing personality. So she was more, I would consider, an old soul. And again, I say that's God because that's what I needed. I needed someone that was nurturing, someone who would say, let's just go to the movies. Let's just get out to go to the movies. Let's just go for a walk. Nothing big. Let's just do this. And she was great. And we were roommates through the entire 4 years that we were in college. And like I said, still friends today. And so I think my identity was really forming in that way through the relationships that I was seeing, and even the lifestyles that I was seeing other people live, and deciding what was that going to look like for me. But I was always very focused on what is life going to look like after college. I need to make sure that I have a plan. And so again, that was internships, that was jobs that I had, that was piles of interview books that if you walked into my room, you'd trip over piles of interview books so I could be polished and ready to go when the time called. And I graduated college already having a job. So I graduated knowing what my start date was going to be, and it was very locked in and focused.
Cool. So and I'm sorry, I'm being very selfish because I'm so interested in your stories.
No.
You get to the stuff you really want to talk about. When I think of you moving now, so you're starting your job, and I'm starting thinking of associations because I believe 100% we are who we associate with. We end up, if we find really good associations, our life gets to be great. If we spend a whole bunch of time with really poor associations, our life isn't as great because we're just dwelling in this bad association situation.
Yeah.
So you get your job, you go out. How are you cultivating your newest relationships that are helping you become the successful person that you are?
Again, I like to say there was a lot of ordained steps. So I entered the workforce and I worked in New York City, but I worked in another borough, so outside of Manhattan, which is unusual because it was a major banking institution, but they were outside of New York City. And so I'd been there for about 6 months. And my manager at the time said, "Oh, I know you said you lived in the Bronx. I'm interviewing this other person that also lives in the Bronx. Do you know where this is?" And I said, "Oh, that's so strange. It's only about 4 or 5 blocks from where I live." And then I look and see, well, what school does she go to? And I was like, wow, I knew somebody who went to that school. And it was my childhood best friend that was interviewing at the same company that I worked in this borough that was outside of Manhattan. Now, this friend, her mom had gone to school with my dad. Her dad had grown up in the same neighborhood as my mom. So again, there were these connections there. And we hadn't spoken to each other in several years. And she ended up working there. And so again, I'm only a few months into the job, and someone that I essentially knew from being a little girl was now in the same space. So it's a lot of these ordained things where, again, as I was figuring it out, and I was very rough around the edges when I started in corporate America, she was there and she was someone who knew me. So that was one. Then secondly, I had a manager who was fantastic. He was so understanding. He used to say, "I know the potential that you have. We just need to soften your edges. The way you say things sometimes have a little bit of a bite and not everyone understands it, but I know that you're really smart, that you're really talented and you're going to go far. I'm going to help you." And again, how rare is it that you find someone who doesn't want to make a quick judgment, but instead says, "I see what's there. I understand this person and I really want to mentor them." And so those two things were crucial as I was starting my career.
Wow. I can imagine your bite was probably from being determined and relentless and
Yes.
you got a plan. You got something you need to do, and you don't really
Yes.
have time to play games with people. So
Yes.
I
And it
want to
was
be direct. I want to
survival,
be
right? Like you're trying to survive. I don't have time to be sweet and sugar and all of those things. I was very determined on let's get this job done. And sometimes I did say things in a way that didn't always sound great, but now looking back on it, I knew I have a lot of empathy for that girl that entered those doors, not knowing anything about what corporate America would look like in the 30th floor of a tall glass building and conference room she had never entered. And the fanciest food she had might have been mashed potatoes from KFC, to be quite honest. And she really delivered and showed up.
I got to ask you this because I keep hearing it in the way that you're talking, and that is your faith. And you talk about things being ordained. You talk about God being part of it. Just walk me through, how God played a part in all this that got you through all of this things that you've been through in this early part of your life. And what does that mean to you, that relationship?
Well, the interesting thing is that God is with you even when you aren't with him. Mm-hmm. And so when I was going through all of these things as a teenager, I remember my grandfather at the time was still alive when my mom had passed away, and he was a strong man of faith. And I couldn't share that faith. I was so upset and angry and confused. And it wasn't at specifically God. It was at everything, just not understanding that this was the cards. These were the cards that were dealt, that my family wasn't here, just all of these things. And so I lost my faith for a really long time. And I just said, I'm agnostic. Maybe it exists. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But there was always something. It's like, I do know, and I believe this, and I see it again in these ordained steps that I would never take for granted to happenstance. I would never say it's just coincidence. I always knew that there was a fabric of something more. And it wasn't until later on, I get a little emotional when I say this. I feel kind of my head tingle, but it's again, just turning back to God and God saying, I've always been there. And that to me is something that I don't take for granted at all. It's an important relationship that I have in my life. And despite all of the things that people might say, well, how could she get through this? Or how does she still have faith? I am very faithful, and I'm still thankful. I'm thankful that I'm here. I'm thankful that I can share this as a testimony today. I'm grateful for maybe one person listening to this and finding some semblance of themselves, even if the story doesn't look exactly the same, but maybe our themes are parallel to each other and they can find something in that. So I am still grateful to be able to share this story and for the successes that I've had and for the love that I've been able to have despite all of the things that have happened. So it's important for me to give thanks where it's due.
Oh my gosh. Well, cool. So I think I know you now. I know you like I want to know you. It's just you're such a neat individual. But I really do want to kind of talk about now. Why you're so successful. What are the things that you're doing? I know you said, hey, one of your commas was a communication strategist. Now, I was a communication manager, a broadcast major, and I have no idea what a communication strategist does. I got a degree that says I should know. I'm probably right that I do. But kind of talk to me about the things that you've been able to do. And I can imagine that the things that you're doing have been greatly not to just help yourself, but to help others. I can tell you're that kind of person. And you have this portion of you that says, I want to do things that make a difference and an impact in other people's life. So I want to hear, I know I'm going to hear about the impact because I don't think you could separate those two things out, but just kind of go through like that journey of this is what I do and this is why I do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking that. So communication strategist is a very highfalutin way to say that I help people talk about their own story, get better at public speaking, and communicating their own value and their message. And so I think that is so important now. We're in 2025. There's all these changes that are happening around us, and we hear about AI and changes in the job force and all of these things. And to me, communication never goes out of style. But it's also not always easy for people to communicate the great things that they do, to be able to communicate their expertise or their skills or their talents in a way that somebody else understands or listens. And so that's a lot of the work that I help people do. And it's a funny way that I stumbled into that. I, like most people, had been working over 15 years in my career. And some days you kind of look up and say, is this it? Is it like, how many more years till I retire? Is this what it's looking like? And I got to that place where I thought there's just a little bit of a whisper of wanting to do something else. And so I'd gone out and I interviewed. And as I interviewed at other places, I realized it wasn't the company. I just wanted to do something else, something different. And it wasn't about different company names or locations. It was a different type of work. I wanted, again, to do something that I felt was more of service, more meaningful, more helpful to people. Now, I've been in marketing my entire career. And at this point, I was working in business to business marketing, which is a little bit different. So it's businesses selling to other large corporations. And you don't really get to interact with people in the same way. It was a lot of data, a lot of analytics. And while I enjoy that, what I love the most is working with people. And so I felt called to do something like that again. And so I started podcasting back in 2017. I thought, well, I'm going to pick up a mic and I'll figure this out. And I went to Google University and got my master's at YouTube to figure out how is it to start a podcast, make it sound decent and all of those things. And from there, I was invited to speak on different stages. I had a fellowship with NPR. I spoke at Podcast Movement. And these doors started to open in a way that they weren't opening as quickly in corporate America anymore. And it was confirmation that I was supposed to be doing this new thing. And so I continued to follow that road, follow that yellow brick road to see what was going to come. And I kept doing that. And along the way, I found people that would ask, hey, how are you doing this? Or how did you get people to see you as Monica, owner of You Want to Do What, versus working at company X or company Y? And so I realized more people also wanted to learn how to do this. They also wanted to learn not just the business of public speaking, but the art of public speaking. And what does it mean to deliver a message and have people remember it, retain it, and then recite it to someone else, which is one of the most meaningful things you can do when you communicate a message, have someone remember what it is that you said. And so just last week, I had someone who booked a call with me. And she heard me speak last July, so almost a year ago, had heard me speak and recited back words that I said during a panel discussion. It wasn't even a keynote, it was a panel discussion. And she remembered some things that I said. And that is the meaningful work, being able to speak directly into the heart or minds of someone and helping other people do that, because we all have, as you know, these beautiful stories, and you've created a container for all of us to share our stories. We want more people to be able to do that. And I help them just say it in a way that maybe people want to listen and that they also feel confident sharing it. So it comes from a place of, even if it's a hard story, it's a scar, not a scab, right? Because that's also very different. How can we tell it from that place? And so that's the work that I do now.
I love that analogy, a scar, not a scab. Mm-hmm. I've never even thought about it that way, as to, okay, yeah, because, scars are part of the healing. They're there that remind you that this event happened. Yeah. But a scab, you're right in the middle of it. I mean, it's trying to heal. Or oh my gosh. So do you mostly work with women or men or all walks of life? Who do you work with?
All walks of life, to be quite honest. So typically who I've worked with, entrepreneurs mostly. I also have people who are burgeoning entrepreneurs. So they may be in a corporate role. They have their side hustle and they want to do something either for extra income, or they're trying to build a business on the side. And I've been fortunate to say it's been men and women that I've worked with. And I think the mechanics of it are the same. Men sometimes want a slightly different approach to how we get to the destination, but I love it. I love working with people who want to be able to connect, one, with themselves, because it's not all strategy, Dr. B. It's also mindset. Mm-hmm. How do I feel comfortable sharing my story? There's a vulnerability that exists, as you know, to be able to share your story. And also, again, as I mentioned, that confidence and that clarity that's needed. And so I really help people, whether it's a TEDx talk they want to share, whether they want to speak more confidently in their next meeting, or they're pitching for funding, for example, for their business. All of those things we work on together, and also the internal practice that we need so that we can show up. And when the slides go dark or the tech doesn't work, you still feel okay in your body because you are prepared for it.
Gotcha. You mentioned and maybe I just heard it, but I think I wrote down, you want to do what? Is that the name
Mhm.
of your company? Is that
It
what?
is.
And when somebody comes to you and say, you like, are you want to do what? Is that, I mean,
That's what I told myself when I had this idea of wanting to do something else. It had been almost 3 years of me actually wanting to do something else before I actually did it. Because I kept telling myself, you want to do what? You have this corporate job. You don't need to do this. Just stay comfortable, right? The old echoes of stay safe. You have a stable job. Don't rock the boat. It was all of those thoughts. And I said, I bet other people have their own you want to do what ideas that either their family is telling that to them or their friends or colleagues or peers, or maybe even themselves, just as it was for me. And so that became the name of the company. Not very SEO friendly, but I think when people hear it, it does resonate with a certain group of people.
oh, it resonated with me. I mean, I heard it. I remembered it.
Mhm.
Usually I have to write stuff down. I just remembered it. But I can see myself on the phone with, this is how I see it. I called you up and I tried to pitch this idea that I want to do. And then I just kind of hear you and this might not be how you do it. But you want to do what? And then I would say, let's go.
Yeah,
Let's do it. And you helping me through
exactly.
that process just sounds
Yes.
like it would be so fun to be able to open up that door to be able to achieve, the things that you've been thinking about. Like
Yeah.
one of the things that I kind of say, I try to help people become the person that God put them on this earth to do. That's kind
Mhm.
of when I'm doing coaching and I'm talking, it's always
Yeah.
coming back to how do I help you become the person that you need to be? And so I start, as I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, how cool would that be to, I think this is what I want to do, but I'm scared or I'm afraid. I get to
Mhm.
call Monica. She gets to
Mhm.
say, you want to do what? And then helps you devise a plan on how
Yes.
to get there. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. One of the things I would love to find out from you, because I can tell
Mhm.
you're a big personal development type
Yes.
person. And maybe you can just help me with like, I ask this question a lot because I want to find out how much time people spend working on themselves. So many
Mhm.
people spend time working on something for somebody else or other things, or like you said, learning sports. They know all the stuff about
Mhm.
athletes or they know all the stuff about music, and they don't work on them. And then they wonder why that person gets to achieve and the other was. So maybe walk me through your personal development
Mhm.
journey and what you do now to make sure that you
Mhm.
stay on top of your game.
So I have always loved personal development. I don't know if you remember when it used to be called self-help
Yes.
in the corner of the bookstore, and it was a small little section, and it felt almost as if everybody was creeping into the section and hiding the book as they went up to the register because it wasn't as common to talk
Mhm.
about it. And it felt almost then that may have been a misnomer that somehow self-help meant something might be wrong with you. And I love that there's so much personal development because we truly need personal development. We absolutely need it. And so for me, it's something I work on daily. Again, as I mentioned in my lots of commas, I'm a lifelong learner. So, one, I want to continue to learn about myself.
Mhm.
Two, I'm someone who's constantly evolving, as we all are. And we can say that we're not, but in one way or the other, we are. And so I also want to continue to develop those skills in myself. So it could be a podcast that I might listen to that day, a webinar, a book that I'm reading, an audio book. It may be journaling. It could be going on. Even sometimes I have a puzzle behind me. I work on puzzles to just allow for that time of creativity to develop. It's the best time to sort of this do nothing creative time where a lot of your ideas will coalesce into maybe big projects that you're going to work on. Or I'll think about my clients while I'm putting a puzzle together and an idea might pop up of a way that I can support them in a different way. And then also the personal development is relevant because it helps me be a better coach and strategist and consultant because I'm able to learn, okay, this might be the problem that my client has, or this may be the way they're thinking about it. What if I try this way instead? And so it helps me be better at my job, quite frankly, and also be a better human. So I place a high premium on it. And it's something that I do every single day, that I have it blocked out on my calendar, designated as time to focus on that.
That is cool. Do you have like I tell people about 20% of my waking my waking moments are spent on trying to work on me in some way, somehow, whether I'm walking because I'm trying to do it with my health, or I'm listening to somebody else's podcast, or I'm reading, or I'm just talking to my grandkids about their lives. And I get to be a way better coach when I have to do it with a 3-year-old than a 5-year-old. Right? Because if I can explain a concept to them and they understand it. It was so funny. My granddaughter this morning, she was sitting here. I was getting ready for a podcast, and she's sitting on my lap. And then, and she goes, "Well," she sees the post I was putting on today, and she's 3.5, and she says, "Man, are you getting views, Papa?" And I'm like, "Who are you?" We ever had a conversation about views and what that means? And so somewhere along the line, I must have. Somehow she knows that views are part of what I do, and other people have to look at it. I just thought that was so funny. So do you have like in your thought process, or have you even thought about how much time a person should spend? I mean, I'm sure you're coaching people to spend time working on themselves, but have you ever actually thought through that?
I don't think I've thought through it in a quantifiable way, but I do know that I start and I end my day with personal development.
Okay.
One thing I do notice though, and this also can sometimes be a challenge for my clients, is that everyone wants the strategy. Dr. B, I don't know if you've noticed that, but they want the strategy. Just tell me the key. Just tell me how to do it. But oftentimes the strategy is there. You can get the strategy in a book. You can get the strategy. You can Google the strategy. But there's more to it, because we all have the secret sauce, if you will, right? When we think about weight loss, when we think about retirement, there's steps that have already been there that are proven steps. As Tony Robbins says, success leaves clues. We have the clues. They're already there for us. But then why aren't we all following them? And not because there's something in here, right? And there's something in our minds, and there might be something in our hearts, and there may be blocks that we have and beliefs that we have. Those are the things that are going to make the strategy more effective. But again, not everyone focuses on that. And I understand, because it's hard work. It's not easy to look at yourself. It's not easy to excavate the parts that feel uncomfortable. And it's much easier to say, I don't know. And I'm sure you probably see this as well, but you'll ask a question when you get the I don't know. It's a way to deflect and to not sit in the discomfort of, well, let's just sit here and see what could come up. What could it be? What's 2 or 3 things it might be? That's hard for people to do. And so it does develop and rely on a practice. And the more you can practice it, which is why I lean on it so often, is because I don't want to bypass the work that I know I still need to do in myself. I don't want to bypass instances that might happen in a day that feel uncomfortable, or circumstances that come up. I want to be able to work through those things. And it's not for the faint of heart, but it is so important, because when you're able to do it and you get through it, not around it, not pretending it doesn't exist, but when you get through it, now you can help someone else on their journey. And so I think it's so important to spend that time. So for anyone who's even in the beginning stages of their journey, just start 10 minutes. Start with 10 minutes of something, even if it's a walking meditation where you'll walk. If it's 10 minutes where you sit on the couch, you don't have any distractions, no phone, no television remote in your hand, just for yourself. See what thoughts come up, but spend time with yourself in the stillness. And if you're someone who's faith-based and prayerful, spend that 10 minutes praying and see what comes up. But just start with that if you're in the beginning stages of that journey.
Oh my gosh. When I think of becoming the person, and you just what you said, I just finished a book that hopefully we'll get it released this month. It's called Be Do Have. And it's like becoming that person that can now do the thing. Because once you become that person, you can't help but do it. And once you become the person, the do is like immediately. But we want to have, right? We want to go buy that car and then figure out what we got to do in order to keep the car. And then we never become the person who should have it, which is just what you were speaking to. That says, no, you have to, you can't just get the strategy. Because if you're not that person who can perform the strategy, then you just have a strategy that sits on your desk and you're a very frustrated person and you say it didn't work. When we don't all works, maybe it's not working to get the end, but it's working on you, right?
Exactly.
So
I know you'll appreciate this too. I had a client recently and said, if I could just get a $5,000 order. So she has a product-based business. And I asked her, are you prepared for a $5,000 order? And she said, no. And I said, that's why the $5,000 order isn't there yet, because you're not prepared for it. So we need to do this work internally first and get your systems and yourself and that feeling of overwhelm you have now without the $5,000 order. We need to get those things working so that when the $5,000 order comes, you are celebrating it, not pushing it away or fearing it because you're not prepared for it. And that's the funny thing. We all want the medal without running the race or preparing to run the race. We just want the medal. So it's the same kind of thing. I'm with you 100%.
And then sometimes we give people the medal and then they don't feel like, well, I don't know if it's imposter syndrome or they just feel like they don't deserve it because they don't feel like they're the person. But when you've done the work and you put everything together and you get that medal, you deserve it. It's not
absolutely yes.
any thought process whatsoever. No, I work for this.
Yes.
I want to kind of just transfer into just health a little bit because you were telling me something like you just got to do one step at a time or one. And right now I'm doing a series that I just put out every day because I'm reversing my diabetes. I realize that the medical world doesn't have a clue about, they said that the cure for diabetes has been around for a long time and we just keep getting meds from our folks. And so I started this exercise journey and I'm literally, documenting it on YouTube every day, which is just crazy because I keep talking about stuff but I said, I'm going to start walking. I don't know how far. And so I didn't put an amount on the goal. I just put a goal is I'm going to start walking because people say, well, you walk 3 miles a day every day now. And so that's easy. You're lucky. And I'm like, I walk from my door to the sidewalk and back. That's how I started. And then I go from my door to the sidewalk and then across the street and back because everything hurt. My knees hurt, everything. And so, how, in your journey, in your health, and how you're coaching people to be healthy, you're being healthy, because I think if we're not getting oxygen to our brain, then our brains don't work as good. Right. But what do you do, and how do you coach this thing called health, and then the progression of you're not going to be Mr. Olympus or look like the people in the gym when you first started?
So I rely on morning movement. So morning movement is essential and I go out for walks. And my thing is, again, similar to you, I used to have a certain mileage amount that I wanted to reach. And then it was just joyful. I would keep walking, some days longer than others. I looked down, maybe it was five miles. Some days it was 8 miles. Literally, I had one time where my boyfriend asked, where did you drive this morning? Because I saw that your location was really far away. I said, no, I went for a walk. He said, you walked that far? I said, I was listening to a really good book and I kept walking. And then I got curious of, I've never walked down this street. I wonder what this looks like. And before I knew it, I had traversed several miles away from where we live. And that's a joyful thing for me. I enjoy that time of being out. Again, it's quiet. The weather, when it's nice here on the East Coast, it's a great time to be out. So morning movement is also something that I encourage. And I like to say it helps you beat the BS, right? Because in the start, after your day, people want your time. There's a meeting that pops up. There's a family member. There's a little in your life that you need to take care of. And there's all these other things that sort of pop up like whack-a-mole. But in the morning, if you can take that little bit of time for yourself, even if it's just 15, 20, 30 minutes for yourself, start your day with that. One, to me, it fuels my tank. It makes me feel good knowing I've given myself that time at the very beginning of the day. And then even if I can't get out again the rest of the day because it does get busy, I know I've at least allotted that time for myself. And so that's something that's important for me.
Wow. That's so cool. I want to give a disclaimer on you and I walking, because I'm sure it's happened to you. And for those of you who are saying, I want to start walking, you start walking and you put the podcast on or the book and you're walking through it. Just be aware of where you're going, because I walk so far out and then like, wait a minute, I got to walk home. And I'm out
it's
there.
So true. Like, it is so true. I had mapped this walk this one time. I'd mapped a walk and then there was supposed to be these city bikes, these public bicycles that you could rent. And so I'd mapped it that, okay, when I get to this location, a bike station will be there, and then I'll hop on the bike and I'll come back. When I got to the location, there was no bicycles located there. And I looked down, and it was about 9.5 mile walk. And I thought, there's no way I have 9.5 miles coming back. I just don't have the time. I don't think I have the stamina. I'm just not prepared to walk 19 miles in a day. Wasn't on the plan. And I had to call a friend, and I said, hey, I'm here. They said, where are you? And so I shared my location. They said, you walked there? I said, yes. I thought there was going to be a city bike station. There is not. Can you come get me? They mapped it. They said, it's going to take us about 40 minutes with traffic to get you. So I said, well, I'll hang tight and I'll sit here. And I sat on this little bench, and it was a nice day. And I sat there with my phone, just hanging out, waiting. And I saw the car pull up, and then I went home. And so make sure that, again, to your point, you have the stamina to get back home, or someone can come get you if you just don't have enough fuel in the tank.
Yeah, like even if you call Uber, whatever, just make sure you have an ability, because you will get lost in yourself on a good walk. And then, whether you get lost and you don't know where you're at, or you just walk too far and go, wait a minute, how am I getting back? So I love that. Give me the title of 3 books that you would say that maybe everybody should read, or 3 of your favorite books, and why they're your favorite. Just on, maybe it's just one book. I mean, but yeah, I'd love to hear.
Oh my gosh, it's so hard. I love books. Okay, so one book that comes to mind immediately is called "The Mountain Is You."
Okay.
That book is phenomenal. And again, it talks to a lot of the beliefs and the stories that we tell ourselves, and really asks us to question, are those things true? Or are those, again, just stories that we've told ourselves? So it helps us challenge that, but also normalize that many of us have these same thoughts. And so often we want to say that we're different, or it's exclusive to us. But I think there's something powerful of knowing that it's not just the way that we feel, that other people feel okay. And if they can push through it, then there's the option for you to try to do that same thing. So The Mountain Is You is one book. Atomic Habits is another book. Mm-hmm. I think it's really essential, especially when you're starting a new journey, your business, anything that you're doing that's a little bit different. I think habit stacking, a lot of the practices and very technical, tactile exercises that they have in the book, I think is extremely helpful. So that would be the second book. And then the third book is going to be a fiction book, and it's called The Midnight Library. And if you've never read The Midnight Library, it is, if you've ever questioned, what would it have looked like if I had taken path A instead of path B? This book will help you explore what that looks like in a really fun way. It's a fiction book, but it's a beautifully written book. It will have you go through all of the emotions. So those are the 3 books that I would recommend. So you have 2 nonfiction, 1 fiction, and they all have a certain use that I think will be really helpful to the listeners.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for giving me that, because I wanted to be, I'll put those in the, in the description below, and, in the comments, whatever, that pin it. Because we are who we read, we are who we associate with, we are who we dive into. And to find out somebody like yourself who is, making things happen for other people, it's so cool to see what you read. I've read Atomic Habits, what an amazing book, but the other 2 I have not. And so I can't wait to jump in. I think I got some credit still on my audiobooks and that kind of stuff. Are you writing a book right now? Do you have one? What is?
It's funny you asked that. I've not written a book, but I was just talking to someone earlier today that it's really something that I want to do. I said when I was 4 years old to my dad that I was going to write a book. And I don't know where that came from, this idea that I was going to write a book. I've always been a big reader, and I know that I've always wanted to write a story at some point of some kind. And I feel more called to do it than ever before. So it's not here yet, but I know that there is a book inside me, and I'll let you know when that happens.
I can't wait. I know there's a book inside you. That's why I asked. And I hope you don't wait, because I just, I finished my first book. Is called There Is No Tiger, which is all about overcoming overthinking and controlling anxiety. And I think it is a really good book. And then I've written, I was a special ed kid, told I would never even graduate college. And now I'm writing, I'm able to, but I waited until I'm 50 some years old in order to be able to write my first book, because I didn't think that I could do it. I didn't think anybody would want to hear what I had to say. And more importantly, I just didn't think I had the writing skills to be able to physically write a book. And now, I'm getting ready to start my fourth book. And it's just, I know that's so cool for you to be able to do it. So I want to encourage you because I could tell I want to read your book. And so whatever it is, I want to make sure that I read your book. I was, like I said, I was selfish today. I got so much out of this podcast. And so if you're watching, I won today. And so hopefully you get to win too, because that's what I get to do with doing these. What didn't we talk about that I want to make sure that you might have wanted to say or do, or, make sure that our audience knows all about what Monica, actually probably where you came on my podcast for.
I really do appreciate that. I just want to say thank you so much for the thoughtful conversation, and congratulations to you for writing all of these books. And again, it shows it's the stories that we tell ourselves, but you told yourself a new story and you're an author, and that's incredible. So I want to acknowledge that and celebrate you for that. For me, I'd love to share with your listeners, if you are someone who is thinking about telling your story or wondering even how to position yourself in the workplace for more authority, in your business for more authority, if you visit my website, youwannadowhat.com, there's a free gift for you called the Authority Accelerator, which are practical exercises so that you can help excavate those stories that are inside of you and how you want to tell them. And I want to encourage everyone. We tend to downplay our accomplishments. We tend to downplay the things that we are skilled at. But your ordinary is someone else's extraordinary. So if this is the message that you needed to hear today, to not discount or diminish yourself, then go ahead and take one tiny action after the conversation we've had that you're listening to now, and do that for yourself. So again, you can visit youwannadowhat.com, grab that Authority Accelerator. It's a free gift for you, no strings attached. And please birth your story into the world and feel confident sharing it. And if there's anything that I can do specifically to support you, you can visit my website. We can hop on a call, have a one-to-one conversation to see if there's a way that I can support you through my work in communication. And I just, again, want to thank you so much, Dr. B, for everything that you did and this great conversation you facilitated today.
Thank you, man. What an amazing conversation. I hope you go back and you listen to it. One of the things that I would listen to conversations, or I'd be on, and I'm trying to write everything down because I guess special ed student, there's some special ed that's still there because I didn't realize that I was like recording it and I could just hit pause and then write it down and then go back to it. I'm like trying to write it out like I'm sitting in an audience, trying to write it down. But this conversation that we had has so many gems in it. So many things that you can take and apply to your life. So many examples of what it takes to have that determination, to have that relentlessness, to have that grit. Monica is that example. And so please, if you know somebody who could utilize or be able to take advantage of this conversation, share it with them. The worst thing they could do is just not listen to it. But if you know somebody, you say, well, I don't know if they'll like me for trying to share podcasts. No, if you know it'll help them, then go ahead and share it with them. It might not be next week that they listen to it, but it might be a year from now when they really need to, and then it can resonate. And the other thing that I would say, if you are that person who's really trying to figure out how to tell your story, Monica would be a great person to make sure. And so I didn't know Monica before today. We just got to know each other, but I could tell you will be happy for spending some extra time with them. And so go ahead, hit the what do you call it, that button that says notification when podcasts come out, the subscription button that comes out. That just helps us all. I want to get a better percentage of people who enjoy these to know that I can make sure that there's more better content that's coming out, that I can be better at what I do than I am. And so I want you to also remember that you, my friend, are God's greatest gift. He loves you if you allow him to. So please allow him to. I'll look forward to talking to you guys on the next one and the next one and the next one. And Monica, again, thank you so much for being part of the Living Boldly with Purpose podcast. And I can't wait to do some more stuff with you. Our time together is absolutely not done. So we'll talk with you guys soon. Have a wonderful, incredible day.